Tonight, border crisis field trip.
This Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives.
House Republicans hold a hearing in Texas on border security as Democrats boycott the move.
Plus, spiritual comfort and practical help.
After the earthquake, I have no job and my workplace was destroyed.
Operation Blessing's work ministering to the survivors of the massive earthquakes in Turkey.
And the Internet of Things.
It has your current temperature on it. It also has your target temperature on it.
Why everything everywhere connected to the web is a hacker's dream.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A major abortion case with national implications. Good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder.
I'm John Jessup. Welcome to Faith Nation. A federal judge in Texas is considering a case that could force a major abortion pill around for more than 20 years to go off the market. That hearing happening today, and no matter the outcome, the case likely will land at the Supreme Court.
Today's hearing aims to take the drug mifepristone off the market, at least temporarily, while the larger case at hand proceeds. The case seeks to overturn the Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone and one other abortion pill. The government has increased availability of these abortion pills in recent months, allowing them to be delivered by mail after a telehealth visit with a doctor, and opening the door for pharmacies to be able to sell the drugs. Pro-life groups argue the pills should never have been approved. And with that, we're joined by Abby Johnson, CEO of And Then There Were None. Abby, welcome. Good to have you with us this evening. So early reporting suggests a Trump-appointed judge might be open to the claim that the abortion pill was not properly vetted. How hopeful are you that this preliminary injunction will be granted and this pill will be shelved at least temporarily?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure that it's a victory either way. Abortion facilities will just simply switch and they'll start using the misoprostol only based abortion pill method, which means that women will forego taking the mifeprex or the mifepristone pill before completing the medication abortion. So this is the way that medication abortions have been done all around the world without the mifeprex. Mifeprex is not used in Canada. It's not used in Mexico. It's not used in many European countries. So medication abortion will still continue even if this injunction is upheld, even if mifepristone is pulled off the market. Unfortunately, what will happen is abortion facilities will use this misoprostol and they will begin to use it in an even more dangerous way for women. So I'm not sure that it's a win if the injunction is upheld and mifeprex is pulled off the market. I mean, the win is if medication abortion is banned. That's the win. But right now, that's not really what's being debated.
Abby, prior to the hearing, attention shifted to Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk with questions about judge shopping and why he tried to delay information about today's hearing, at least publicly. Abby, if the ban is imposed, do the arguments that you just mentioned hurt the overall case that the pro-life side is making?
Well, one of the things is I'm not sure a lot of pro-lifers really understand the implications of this. So they think that by pulling off mifeprex, that means that, it's somehow a win or medication abortion is going to be off the market. But that's just not the case. And so, pro-lifers need to understand what this means for the abortion industry. They need to understand what this means for pharmacies, what this means for women who are going to be taking these pills. It does not mean that medication abortion is going to be off the shelf. It does not mean that medication abortion options are going to be off the table.
Right.
Yeah, just a few seconds, Abby, but the government argues a ban will upset the FDA's ability to do its job and, negatively affect women. What do you say to that?
Well, what I can say is that by pulling mifeprex off the table, what does happen is that it also pulls the ability for women to reverse their abortion by using the abortion pill reversal. So I'm not sure that this is the intention that pro-lifers are really wanting.
All right, Abby Johnson with And Then There Were None. Abby, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks, Abby. Well, members of the House Homeland Security Committee took the show on the road today, hosting a field hearing in Texas to get a closer look at what's happening on the southern border. It's one of several GOP-planned field trips to investigate Biden administration immigration policies and potential connections to the influx of migrants.
Democrats on the committee chose to stay home, calling the move a political stunt. The CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke is following the developments. Caitlin, how did Republicans respond today to the Democrats' boycott?
John, Jenna, Chairman Mark Green first defended the decision to hold Wednesday's hearing in Texas, saying it's important that lawmakers get a first-hand look at what's going on if they're going to make informed decisions about how to move forward. He also had harsh words for the absent committee members.
You can't have bipartisanship if the other side fails to show up for their duty. And in the Army, when someone didn't show up, we called them AWOL, or absent without leave. Their place of duty is at this hearing because it's a full hearing, and they're not here. They're AWOL.
Since taking over the majority, House Republicans have made clear their intent to fix the southern border crisis. This hearing focusing on changes the Biden administration made to U.S. immigration policies when it took over.
Chief, in fiscal year 2020, the policy was detain and remove. The entire objective was to avoid releasing any illegal immigrant for any reason. In 2021, Secretary Mayorkas, the new administration, gutted all of those policies. Do you acknowledge, as the chief of the Border Patrol, that the driver of the crisis that you have described, of this dramatic change in flow, the policy is the policy of this administration to release instead of detain or remove illegal immigrants?
Law enforcement's pretty simple, sir. You have to have capacity and you have to have consequences. And anytime you don't have consequences, you're certainly going to see some increases.
Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz admits DHS doesn't have operational control, pointing to 5 sectors along the border that aren't secure. Sheriff Brad Coe of Kenny County, Texas, says his jurisdiction is under siege due to the amount of border crossings by illegal immigrants and smugglers.
We're averaging between 160 and 180 people per night that are going through the county unchallenged. That comes out to roughly 60,000 people entered through my county this year.
Lawmakers also focusing on how Mexican cartels are using the chaotic border situation to flood the U.S. with drugs like fentanyl.
I live in Georgia. My state is not a border state, but let me inform you of some of the things that we're dealing with. Fentanyl-involved deaths has increased by over 230% since Biden has taken office. In my district alone, we have had fentanyl-involved deaths increase by over 350%.
There is definitely increase in fentanyl coming here.
Assistant Director for Homeland Security Investigations, Stephen Kagan, told lawmakers his teams have found that China is the source of the fentanyl supply chain, producing the chemicals needed to make the drug and shipping them to Mexican labs.
We've seized, I believe it's a little bit over 3.3 million pounds of precursor chemicals coming from China, entering into Mexico.
Republicans say testimony like what they heard in Wednesday's hearing will not only help them shape future legislation, but also hold the Biden administration accountable. John, Jenna?
National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Well, here with us now is Chad Wolfe, AFP Institute Executive Director. Chad, welcome to Faith Nation. First off, we saw a similar style hearing at the border last month. How commonplace are these hearings, Chad? And as a former Department of Homeland Security Acting Director, how beneficial are they?
Well, I think the hearings are important for a variety of different reasons, but I would say that this is the second hearing, and you mentioned it in the opening segment. This is actually the second hearing that Democrats have boycotted. They have not shown up to different hearings to hear witness testimony on what's going on in the border. And I can say, you know, as a former acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security and visiting the border dozens of times, there is no substitute for going to the border, talking to the Border Patrol agents, to the men and women down there to understand the challenges. And so if lawmakers are going to be responsible and be on a committee that has jurisdiction over the border and pass legislation and do their oversight work, then they have a responsibility to show up onto that border and talk to the agents and talk to the men and women that are doing that job every day. So I think it's interesting, it's disappointing, but obviously not surprising that you're going to have one party decide not to show up and to attend these hearings. I think the hearing was dramatic. I think what we heard from Chief Raul Ortiz contradicted what this administration has said for the past 24 months, right? He basically said the policies from day one is what caused this crisis. He has said that there is no operational control over the border, which contradicts what Secretary Mayorkas has said. And then, of course, when he was asked, does physical infrastructure work? Is that what Border Patrol agents need? Do they need an effective wall system? His answer was yes, they do. Again, all of these have decisions were overturned by political leadership inside the White House, and it's caused and is certainly part of the reason that we have the crisis that we do today.
Yeah. Chad, Republicans say they want to hold the Biden administration accountable for the crisis on the border. What more should be done to get a better handle on the border? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, you know, unfortunately, the American people have seen this crisis unfold for the past 24, 25 months now. I'm not sure that you need to convince the American people that there is a crisis going on. They know that there's a security crisis. There's because we see national security and public safety threats coming across that border every day. They know there's a humanitarian crisis. More individuals are dying on this dangerous journey through Mexico to get to the border. More migrants are dying in the desert and on the river than they ever have in the history of our country. And then, of course, there's a fentanyl crisis going on. All of this stems from the failed policies of this Biden administration. And I should also say the failed policies of the government of Mexico as well. And I think the American people they want some solutions. They don't want to keep admiring the problem. We've admired the problem now for 24 months. I think now that House Republicans are in a position of power, it's time to do something.
Chad Wolfe, thank you so much. With the AFP Institute, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Suffering and survival coming up, how one family is struggling to endure the aftermath of Turkey's earthquakes. Safety in the sky under investigation after a string of near misses at airports across the country. The Federal Aviation Administration is holding a safety summit for the first time since 2009. It comes as the FAA investigates multiple near catastrophic safety-related situations.
In the intervening time, we've experienced additional incidents, including events on runways, terminal ramp areas, and even unruly passenger incidents that continue to defy logic. I think I speak for all of us when I say that, and certainly the traveling public, that these events are concerning. They are not what we've come to expect during a time of unprecedented safety in the U.S. air transportation system.
One investigation is into an incident just last week at Reagan National in Washington, D.C. A regional flight crossed a runway where a United plane was getting ready to take off. It was the 7th close call this year.
Well, Russia is under the microscope for alleged atrocities committed since the start of its war with Ukraine. From the killing and torture of religious leaders to the destruction of houses of worship, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom heard about violations of religious freedom and human rights. The exiled chief rabbi of Moscow testified about atrocities and continued anti-Semitism faced by Jews in Russia.
Since the beginning of the war, we've witnessed, as Abel said, a new situation for Jews in Russia is becoming more and more dangerous. And in September, I called on the Jews of Russia, whoever can leave, should leave the country. We are worried about the state of the Jewish community there. Not everyone can leave.
Rabbi Goldschmidt says 30% of Russian Jews have fled Russia since the war began, with some 50,000 emigrating to Israel. Another 30,000 went to other cities in the greater Middle East.
In Turkey, earthquake damage is still coming into focus. What is clear, life will never be the same.
That is right. As survivors deal with their grief and look ahead to what's next, CBN's Operation Blessing is on hand to bring spiritual comfort and practical help. CBN's Chris Mitchell brings us one family's story of suffering and survival.
Behind me is one of the scenes the world has been watching since February 6th when the earthquake struck. This is the city of Kahramanmaraş, one of the worst hit cities in the region. And for nearly 300 miles, the earthquake zone has left behind a trail of ruined buildings and changed lives. Families like the Dukaklis, about 200 miles away in the city of Hatay. The lives of so many of these Turkish families are marked by before and after the earthquake. And we sat down with Phyllis and her family in this temporary tent to hear their story.
Well, before the earthquake, I had my own business. I was making bread and pastry. Well, everything was going very well. But now, unfortunately, after the earthquake, I have no job and my workplace was destroyed. But right now, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to go back to my bakery anymore.
Phyllis made all sorts of Turkish baked goods, but the earthquake and its aftermath took its toll on her livelihood, her family, and the children.
Our fear was too great. I don't know when my children's psychology will improve because, unfortunately, we even had to remove the corpses. Even my uncle's markets were destroyed. We had to remove the bodies ourselves. Things are very bad.
The family now lives in this tent.
We are staying here. In other words, we are afraid that we cannot go home because the aftershocks continue. Children need education. Yes, that is my biggest concern. I don't know what will happen to the education of the children.
After the quake, Operation Blessing came to help. They visited the family, provided food, and examined the grandfather suffering from post-traumatic shock.
Blessing upon blessing comes to us. We're always waiting for you. You supported us. Thank you very much. Many thanks to those who did this. We're so proud. We got emotional. It made us even more happy.
Also, thank you for coming and making us feel welcome. It is nice. We felt that we were not alone. God bless you.
For Phyllis, her goal is to bake again.
I hope to continue my work elsewhere, and I will invite you there. There will be treats from me. I make tandoori bread. If we get a chance, we are proud to present it to you.
On this day, the OB team came as friends and left as family. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Hatay, Turkey.
Thank you, Chris. Connectivity crisis, from light bulbs to cameras, even your refrigerator, all connected by the internet. Why that could put you at risk. Next on Faith Nation.
All right, well, we live in an internet age, and in it, the so-called Internet of Things are everyday devices like your appliances or your home security system.
That's right, and some of those devices hold important and often sensitive personal information. And as Mark Martin reports, connectivity can also be a hacker's dream.
Up in the top, you have a representation of the actual thermostat. It has your current temperature on it, and it also has your target temperature on it.
Bob Womack can control his home thermostat remotely through his phone. The thermostat is a part of the Internet of Things, or IoT.
At work, I can get a call from my wife and say, can you look into this, or can you change the temperature or whatever. But it also has an ability to schedule when your heat is going to go on and when it's going to turn off.
The Internet of Things is something that everybody deals with every day. So it could be a chip in your refrigerator. It is anything that's convenient in your house, like security system, the cameras that you have at your door, any of these types of devices that you've installed on your house, smart light bulbs, those are all part of the Internet of Things.
From HVAC systems to kitchen appliances to garage door openers, the Internet of Things is widespread. According to one estimate, there are more than 20 billion IoT devices around the world. Other examples include medical devices and cars with built-in sensors.
It's so prevalent, and because it's typically based on embedded devices that we don't see, sometimes we don't recognize just how prevalent it is.
I didn't even know until it was installed that I was going to have it, but once I had it, it seemed like a good idea to be able to control stuff. The programming is much easier on an iPhone than it is on a thermostat.
Karen Evans of the Cyber Readiness Institute warns, however, that users need to be cautious when it comes to convenience.
The easier you make it for yourself, the more convenient you make it for yourself, the more convenient you're making it for hackers to get into your phone, into your house, into your security system.
Regent University Associate Professor Dr. Alpha Niandoro agrees.
The IoT is very, very vulnerable. The reason being that usually these devices were never meant to be on the internet in the first place. So having internet capability is an add-on, a retrofit. As a result, they do not have the normal controls that would have on a traditional computer like your laptop. they are limited because of that. As a result, it's easy for hackers to get in and cause damage.
And once they get in, the danger can multiply as hackers can target the device that provides the most access.
You can imagine if someone were to get in to the meter and then get the database that houses all the records of the people in a locality and so on. By some extension, they can end up getting people's social security numbers and the like. So all of them really need to be looked into.
So how do you protect yourself? Evans emphasizes password protection, including changing default passwords.
Any of these devices, anything that you buy, any small business, that you change the passwords and that you manage these passwords.
Other tips include keeping the software updated, making sure you're cyber ready, like being on the lookout for phony emails, and knowing what Internet of Things devices you actually have. Womack says having an IoT thermostat did make him leery of hackers, but he believes it's worth the risk if you're on the defensive.
So far, I haven't had any kind of attack. I've got double protection, password protection and encryption, and my router is protected by an encryption system, too.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
And still ahead, back to the moon with NASA's newest spacesuits.
Well, finally tonight, the next generation of spacewear. Much like revealing the fall fashion line, NASA unveiled the prototypes for what astronauts will be wearing on the moon during their next trip to the moon.
Yeah, NASA partnered with Axiom Space to design the moon suits, planning to have new versions ready for training purposes this summer. And what they made up for in style didn't compromise with functionality. Take a look. Unlike the prototype, moon suits will be white, not like these, used during much like the ones used during the Apollo missions, to reflect heat and keep moonwalkers cool. The modern designs providing more flexibility, more protection from the moon's harsh environment, and will come in a wider range of sizes. Moon suits represent a new era of space exploration and a hopeful return to the moon in 2025. So I wonder why the prototype, these aren't white, if they're actually going to be white.
Great questions. And also, they talk about being more flexible. Those still seem hard to actually be flexible in.
Hard to maneuver in.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Well, that's going to do it for Faith Nation
Thanks so
tonight.
much for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.